My king, you cannot go there. The beta murmured, his voice tight with an unfamiliar edge of panic. It's the servants' quarters. It's unseemly. David didn't pause his long, predatory strides. I am the Alpha King, he growled, the gravelly vibration of his voice bouncing off the damp stone walls of the corridor. I go where I please. He shoved open the heavy oak door leading to the lower levels, the smell of cheap lye soap and desperation washing over him. He wasn't looking for a fight. He was looking for her, Lisa, his servant. And he needed to know why the air in the royal pack house suddenly tasted like betrayal. The lower levels were a maze of damp, windowless rooms, a stark contrast to the opulence of the upper floors where David ruled. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of unwashed bodies and fear. He wrinkled his nose, his heightened senses assaulted by the squalor. This was where his pack's least fortunate resided, the ones who scrubbed the floors he walked on and cooked the food he ate. His chosen Luna, Serafina, had always insisted on keeping the servants in their place. It was a sentiment he had largely ignored, his focus consumed by pack politics and border disputes. But today, a strange restlessness had gripped him, an itch he couldn't scratch. The pack house felt stifling, the air thick with unspoken secrets. And then he remembered Lisa, the quiet, unassuming girl who brought him his tea every morning. The girl with the eyes the color of storm clouds and the scent of crushed roses and something else. Something metallic. Rust, blood. He couldn't quite place it, but it lingered in his mind, a constant, nagging puzzle. He moved silently through the labyrinthine corridors, his senses attuned to every sound, every scent. He passed rows of identical doors, the only sound the steady drip of water from a leaky pipe. Then he heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat, a thrumming energy that vibrated in his chest. He stopped outside a door at the far end of the hall. The scent of rust and roses was stronger here, almost overwhelming. He placed a hand on the rough wood, feeling the faint hum of power vibrating beneath his palm. He pushed the door open. The room was small, lit only by a single, flickering candle. In the center of the room, kneeling on the bare floor, was Lisa. Her head was bowed, her long, dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders. She was wearing a simple, gray linen dress, but it was stained with something dark and viscous. David's breath hitched in his throat. It was blood. Lisa? He whispered, his voice barely audible over the thrumming energy in the room. She jumped, her head snapping up. Her eyes, those storm cloud eyes, were wide with fear. She scrambled backward, hitting the wall with a dull thud. My king, she gasped, her voice trembling. What are you doing here? David stepped into the room, the scent of blood hitting him like a physical blow. He looked down at the floor, where Lisa had been kneeling. There, etched into the rough stone, was a symbol. A wolf's head, intricate and ancient, drawn in what looked like fresh blood. What is this? He demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Lisa swallowed hard, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. It's nothing, my king, just a ritual for my mother. A ritual? David repeated, his eyes narrowing. He stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the symbol. He recognized it. It was the mark of the Blood Moon Pack, a pack that had been eradicated centuries ago. A pack known for its dark magic and insatiable bloodlust. Where did you learn this? He asked, his voice softer now, but no less demanding. Lisa hesitated, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. My mother. She taught me. Before she died. David looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the strength in her jaw. This was no ordinary servant girl. This was someone with a secret that could tear his pack apart. "Get up," he ordered, his voice brooking no argument. Lisa scrambled to her feet, her eyes still downcast. "Yes, my king." "We are going to my study," he said, turning toward the door. "And you are going to tell me everything." As he led her out of the room, he couldn't help but notice the way she walked. A graceful, predatory glide that belied her servant status. He also noticed the faint scent of something else clinging to her, beneath the rust and roses. The scent of power. He had come down here to find answers, to quell the unease that had been growing within him. But he had found something far more dangerous. He had found a secret that could destroy everything he had built. And he had found Lisa. The king's study was a sanctuary of dark wood, leather, and silence. David paced behind his massive oak desk, the heavy velvet drapes drawn tight against the afternoon sun. The air was thick with the lingering scent of Lisa, that intoxicating mix of crushed roses, iron, and an undeniable latent power. He had left her in the adjoining sitting room, guarded by two of his most trusted enforcers. She hadn't spoken a word since they left her small, damp room in the lower levels. The silence was deafening. David rubbed his temples, a headache threatening to split his skull. He was the Alpha King. He was supposed to know everything that happened within his territory. Yet, a servant girl had been practicing forbidden blood magic right under his nose. The mark of the Blood Moon Pack. It was a myth, a bedtime story used to frighten unruly pups. But he had seen it with his own eyes, drawn in fresh blood. A sharp knock broke the silence. "Enter," David commanded. Serafina glided into the room, her movements fluid and practiced. She was the picture of perfect Luna elegance. Flawless porcelain skin, hair the color of spun gold, and eyes like polished sapphires. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk that clung to her curves, a silent reminder of her status and beauty. "David, darling," she purred, her voice a soothing melody. "The beta mentioned you were down in the servants' quarters. Is everything all right?" David stopped pacing and looked at her. Serafina was his chosen Luna, the daughter of a powerful allied alpha. Their union was a strategic masterpiece designed to solidify his reign and bring prosperity to their packs. She was everything a Luna should be. Beautiful, graceful, and fiercely loyal to the pack's image. But right now, her perfect facade felt suffocating. "It's nothing you need to concern yourself with, Serafina," he said, his tone dismissive. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a tiny crack in the porcelain mask. "I am your Luna, David. Your concerns are my concerns." She crossed the room and placed a delicate hand on his arm. "Is it a disciplinary issue? I can have the head housekeeper deal with it." "No," David said sharply, pulling away from her touch. "I will handle it." Serafina's eyes narrowed slightly. "Very well. But remember, the solstice ball is only weeks away. We have appearances to maintain. We cannot afford any unsavory rumors." The solstice ball. A grand affair where the Alpha King officially presented his chosen Luna to the combined packs. It was meant to be a celebration of their union, a display of strength and unity. "I am well aware of the solstice ball," David replied, his voice tight. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to." Serafina lingered for a moment, her gaze searching his face. Then, with a curt nod, she turned and left the room, the emerald silk rustling against the Persian rug. David watched her go, a knot of unease tightening in his gut. Serafina was perfect on paper, but there was a coldness to her, a calculated ambition that he had always ignored. He had chosen her for the good of the pack, not for love. Love was a luxury an Alpha King could ill afford. He turned back to the door connecting to the sitting room. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, and opened it. Lisa was sitting on the edge of a velvet settee, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The enforcers stood like statues on either side of the room. "Leave us," David ordered. The enforcers bowed and silently exited, closing the heavy door behind them. David walked over and sat in an armchair opposite Lisa. She didn't look up, her gaze fixed firmly on her hands. "Tell me about the blood," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Whose was it?" Lisa flinched, her knuckles turning white. "Mine, my king." "Why?" She finally raised her head, those storm cloud eyes meeting his. There was fear in them, yes, but also a defiant spark. It was a protection ward. For the pack. David scoffed. A protection ward using the magic of the Blood Moon pack? They were destroyers, Lisa. They reveled in chaos. History is written by the victors, my king. She replied softly. My mother. She taught me the old ways. The true ways. The Blood Moon magic wasn't inherently evil. It was powerful, yes, and dangerous in the wrong hands. But it was also connected to the earth, to the primal forces of nature. And you think you have the right hands? David challenged, leaning forward. I don't seek power, Lisa said, her voice steadying. I only seek to protect. Protect from what? Lisa hesitated, her gaze dropping back to her hands. There is a darkness coming, my king. I have seen it in the shadows, felt it in the wind. A shadow that seeks to consume everything we know. David stared at her, the silence stretching between them. She sounded crazy, a servant girl spouting prophecies of doom. But the sincerity in her voice, the raw conviction in her eyes, resonated with the strange unease that had been plaguing him. And you believe this? Blood magic can stop it? I don't know, she admitted, a vulnerability creeping into her voice. But it's the only thing I have. David leaned back in his chair, studying her. The scent of rust and roses was fading, replaced by a subtle, earthy fragrance that reminded him of a forest after a heavy rain. It was a scent that shouldn't belong to a servant. You are a puzzle, Lisa, he murmured. And I intend to solve you. He stood up, towering over her. You are confined to these rooms until further notice. You will speak to no one but me. Is that understood? Yes, my king. As David left the room, he knew he had crossed a dangerous line. He was harboring a practitioner of forbidden magic, a servant girl who claimed to see the future. It was treason, plain and simple. But as he walked back into his study, the image of Serafina's perfect cold smile flashed in his mind. He had chosen his Luna for the pack. But perhaps the pack needed something else entirely. Perhaps they needed the storm. The war room smelled of stale coffee, ancient parchment, and the sharp, acidic tang of alpha anxiety. David stood over the massive oak table, his large hands planted firmly on the edges of a topographical map of their territory. The heavy silence in the room was a physical weight. Tell me again, David growled, his gaze fixed on the jagged lines marking the northern border. Marcus, his beta, shifted uncomfortably. The usually stoic warrior looked exhausted, the dark circles under his eyes a testament to a sleepless night. It's just as the patrols reported, David. The northern woods. They're silent. The prey animals have fled south. The birds are gone. And the perimeter guards reported a drop in temperature that defied logic. And the scent? Nothing. Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. That's what has the men spooked. No rogue wolves, no vampires, no humans. Just an absence. Like the air itself has been hollowed out. David straightened, the muscles in his back pulling taut beneath his tailored shirt. A shadow that seeks to consume everything we know. Lisa's words from yesterday echoed in his skull, mocking his skepticism. He had spent his entire life relying on claws, fangs, and military strategy. How was he supposed to fight an absence? Double the patrols, David ordered, turning away from the map. Nobody crosses the northern ridge. If the air so much as shivers incorrectly, I want to know. Marcus nodded tersely, but hesitated before leaving. Sire, the pack is whispering. You missed the morning training. You missed the breakfast banquet. Lady Seraphina was displeased. Let them whisper, David snapped, the harshness of his tone causing Marcus to flinch. And let Seraphina manage the banquets. That is what she is good at. Marcus bowed his head and exited, leaving David alone with the crushing weight of leadership. He rubbed his eyes, the chronic headache returning with a vengeance. He needed answers, and he only knew one place to get them. 10 minutes later, David bypassed his usual security detail, carrying a silver tray laden with roasted meats, fresh bread, and fruit. It was a flagrant violation of protocol for the Alpha King to serve anyone, let alone a confined servant. But he didn't care. He unlocked the heavy mahogany door to his private sitting room and slipped inside. Lisa was exactly where he had left her the night before, curled into a tight ball on the velvet settee, staring blankly at the unlit hearth. She hadn't slept. He could tell by the rigid line of her shoulders and the faint, erratic spike in her heartbeat when the door clicked shut. You need to eat, David said, setting the tray down on the low glass table. Lisa flinched, her storm cloud eyes darting to the food, then up to him. She looked pale, the gray linen of her dress swallowing her fragile frame. Yet, beneath the fragility, David could still sense that thrumming, vibrating power. I am not hungry, my king, she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. David ignored her refusal. He dragged an armchair closer to the settee and sat down, his massive frame dwarfing the elegant furniture. He picked up a piece of warm bread and held it out. Eat. You cannot protect anyone if you starve. A flicker of surprise crossed her features. She hesitated, then slowly reached out, her fingers brushing his. Her skin was ice cold, sending a bizarre jolt of electricity up David's arm. He suppressed a shiver, keeping his face impassive. As she took a small, cautious bite, David leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The northern border, he stated softly. The animals have fled. The air is dead. Is this the shadow you spoke of? Lisa froze, the bread turning to ash in her mouth. She closed her eyes, and for a terrifying second, the temperature in the room plummeted, mimicking the dead cold Marcus had described. It has breached the tree line, she murmured, her voice sounding far away, echoing with an unnatural resonance. It feeds on the life force of the earth. Roots, soil, blood. It doesn't matter. It only knows how to consume. What is it? David demanded, his alpha command lacing his tone, compelling her to answer. Lisa's eyes snapped open, and the breath caught in David's throat. For a fraction of a second, the gray storms in her irises parted, revealing a flash of blinding, luminescent silver. It is a curse, David. she breathed, dropping his formal title without realizing it. An ancient grievance, woken from the dark. And it is coming for the crown. The packhouse was a hive of nervous, frenetic energy. Preparations for the solstice ball were in full swing, creating a bizarre juxtaposition of terror and celebration. Downstairs, crystal chandeliers were being polished to a blinding shine, and caterers argued over the importing of rare truffles. Upstairs, guards sharpened their blades, their eyes constantly darting toward the northern windows. David stood on the balcony of his bedroom, overlooking the sprawling manicured gardens. He could smell the incoming snow, mixed with the sickeningly sweet perfume of Serafina, who had just entered his chambers uninvited. 3 days, David? Serafina's voice was brittle, sharp as broken glass. 3 days you have practically barricaded yourself in this wing. The alpha of the Silver Lake Pack arrives tomorrow for the ball, and my husband is playing ghost. David didn't turn around. He gripped the stone balustrade, his knuckles turning white. I am managing a potential threat at the border, Serafina. You know this. I know that Marcus is managing the border, she countered, her heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor as she closed the distance between them. I also know that my maids have seen you carrying food into the west sitting room, a room that has been locked from the outside by your personal guards. David closed his eyes, cursing the lack of discretion in a house full of enhanced senses. He finally turned to face her. Serafina looked breathtaking in a gown of midnight blue, every hair perfectly pinned, her makeup flawless. She was a weapon of diplomacy, honed to a razor's edge. But looking at her now, all David felt was a hollow emptiness. Are you keeping a mistress, David? She asked, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. In our home? Weeks before my official crowning? Do not insult me, Serafina. David growled, stepping into her personal space. The sheer dominance rolling off him forced her to take a half step back, though her chin remained stubbornly high. There is a prisoner in that room. A matter of pack security. Nothing more. A prisoner who requires the king to play waiter? She laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. Do you think me a fool? If it is a threat, throw it in the dungeons. Let the interrogators peel the skin from its bones. By coddling whatever is behind that door, you project weakness. She reached out, her perfectly manicured nails trailing down the lapel of his jacket. My father is expecting a united front, David. If you humiliate me, he will not honor the military alliance. You will face whatever is in those northern woods alone. It was a blatant threat, and it made the wolf inside David snarl, clawing at the confines of his mind. He grabbed her wrist, stopping her movement. He didn't squeeze hard enough to bruise, but the warning was clear. Do not ever threaten me in my own territory, he said, his voice dangerously soft. Play the perfect Luna downstairs. Smile for your father. But do not presume to tell me how to run my pack. He released her hand and walked past her, leaving her standing in the center of the room, a picture of calculating fury. David strode down the hall, waving off the guards at the sitting room door. He threw it open and locked it behind him. Lisa was standing by the window, bathed in the pale afternoon light. The gray linen dress had been replaced by a simple, dark tunic and trousers he had commanded the quartermaster to provide. She looked less like a fragile servant and more like a soldier preparing for a siege. She knows you are hiding something, Lisa said without turning around. Her hearing was impeccable. She only cares about her crown, David muttered, pacing the length of the room. He stopped and looked at her. I need proof, Lisa. I cannot mobilize the entire Allied army based on a cold breeze and the word of a girl I found drawing in blood on my basement floor. Lisa finally turned to face him. The fear that had paralyzed her days ago was gone, replaced by a solemn, heavy resolve. You want proof of the magic? Proof of what I am? Yes. She stepped toward him. She didn't ask for permission. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, jagged piece of flint. Before David could process her movement, she sliced the palm of her left hand. "Stop," David commanded, reaching for her, but she held up her bleeding hand, palm facing him. "Respice in tenebris," she whispered, her voice layering with a strange, harmonic echo. The blood welling in her palm didn't drip. Instead, it defied gravity, floating upwards in tiny, crimson spheres. The room plunged into an unnatural darkness. The afternoon sun abruptly snuffed out. The air grew freezing cold, smelling of ancient dirt and decay. David couldn't move. A vision crashed into his mind, a tidal wave of sensory overload. He saw a massive, formless shadow creeping through the northern pines, leaving brittle, gray husks where vibrant trees had once stood. He felt the agony of the earth being bled dry. He heard 1,000 voices screaming in a forgotten language. And then, standing in the center of the destruction, he saw a wolf. It was massive, larger than any alpha he had ever seen, its fur the color of dried blood, its eyes glowing with a terrifying, luminescent silver. David gasped, stumbling backward as the vision snapped, dumping him back into the sitting room. The sun was shining again. The temperature normalized. Lisa was standing perfectly still, her hand healed, only a faint silver scar remaining. David stared at her, his chest heaving, his reality entirely fractured. He looked into her eyes, waiting for the storm clouds to return. They didn't. Her irises were glowing, pure, unbroken silver, the mark of the royal blood moon line. "You're not a servant," David whispered, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. "You're an alpha." The word alpha hung in the air between them, heavier than the oppressive silence of the northern border. David's instincts, honed by decades of brutal survival and absolute command, flared to life. To have another alpha in his territory, especially one whose lineage was whispered about in terrified bedtime stories, was a direct challenge to his sovereignty. His claws lengthened, pressing against the pads of his fingers. The wolf inside him demanded submission, demanded that he force this silver-eyed anomaly to bare her throat. But he didn't move, because intertwined with that primal urge to dominate was something else. A strange, magnetic pull. The air around Lisa tasted like a brewing thunderstorm, crackling with an ozone sharpness that made David's blood sing. "Hide them," David rasped, his voice rough. Lisa blinked, and the blinding, luminescent silver receded, replaced once again by the familiar, turbulent gray of storm clouds. The sudden drain of magic hit her hard. Her knees buckled. David moved before he consciously registered the decision, catching her by the elbows before she hit the floor. She was alarmingly light, her frame practically vibrating with exhaustion. He guided her to the velvet settee, keeping his grip firm but gentle. The Blood Moon Alphas were eradicated over a century ago, David said, pacing away from her, needing distance to clear his head. Hunted down by the Coalition. You shouldn't exist. My mother was a child when the purges happened, Lisa whispered, leaning her head against the high back of the settee. Her skin was incredibly pale, the silver scar on her palm pulsing faintly. She was smuggled out by a loyal beta. They hid in the human world for decades. When she realized I carried the alpha spark, she knew they would eventually find us. David stopped pacing. So she brought you here? To the heart of the largest pack in the territory? She hid me in plain sight. Lisa confirmed, a bitter smile touching her lips. She bound my wolf using blood magic when I was 7. Forced the shift backward, the lye soap, the manual labor, the malnutrition. It wasn't just servitude, David. It was a camouflage. It masked my scent, kept my aura suppressed. I was invisible. The revelation struck David with the force of a physical blow. He thought of the quiet girl who brought him tea. Her eyes always downcast, her presence entirely ignored by the arrogant nobility of his court. She had been a sleeping dragon scrubbing their floors, suppressing an ocean of power just to survive. "And the ward on your floor?" he asked. The binding my mother placed on me was fraying. The magic, it was leaking. Lisa explained, her voice steadying. "I felt the shadow waking in the north weeks ago. Its presence disrupted the Earth's natural energy, which in turn destabilized my binding. The ward was meant to reinforce it, to keep my scent hidden." David dragged a hand over his face. The political implications were a nightmare. The coalition that had hunted the Blood Moon Pack was spearheaded by the Silver Lake Pack, Seraphina's ancestors. If Seraphina or her father discovered what Lisa was, it wouldn't just be a broken engagement. It would be a declaration of war. "You showed me that vision," David said, turning to face her. "You risked exposing your identity to prove the threat is real. If that thing reaches the pack house, your crown won't matter. The coalition won't matter. We will all be dust," Lisa said. She stood up, her posture shifting. Gone was the subservient slouch. She stood tall, radiating a quiet, undeniable authority that made David's breath hitch. "You are the king, David. But you are fighting a war against an enemy you cannot bite or claw. You need me." He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. Not as a servant, not as a prisoner, but as an equal. "Tomorrow," David said, his voice dropping to a low, commanding rumble. "Alpha Silas of Silver Lake arrives for the solstice ball. The pack house will be overflowing with coalition loyalists." "I know." "You can no longer stay in this room, Lisa," David decided, the plan forming rapidly in his mind. "If you are to help me locate and destroy this shadow, you need access to the war room, the archives, and the perimeter. Seraphina will have me thrown in the dungeons the moment I step foot outside this door." David let out a dark, predatory chuckle. "Let her try. From this moment on, you are no longer a servant. You are the Shadow Guard." The arrival of Alpha Silas was a spectacle of excessive wealth and aggressive dominance. David stood on the grand staircase of the foyer, watching as the massive oak double doors were thrown open. A dozen Silver Lake enforcers marched in, their armor gleaming, followed by Silas himself. He was a mountain of a man, his face crisscrossed with ancient battle scars, his eyes a cold, calculating amber. Beside him, Seraphina beamed, linking her arm through her father's, the perfect portrait of a triumphant Luna. The scent in the foyer was stifling, a mix of expensive colognes, wet fur, and the metallic tang of posturing wolves. "David!" Silas boomed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. He didn't bow. He barely inclined his head, a deliberate slight that made Marcus and the royal enforcers tense. "It is good to see my future son-in-law, though I hear you've been a bit distracted." His eyes darted toward the shadows behind David. "Welcome to my home, Silas," David replied, his tone smooth, betraying none of his internal fury. He descended the stairs, meeting Silas at the bottom. The two alphas shook hands, their grips tightening in a silent, bone-crushing contest of wills. I am never distracted, merely thorough. Silas chuckled, pulling his hand back. Let us hope so. Serafina tells me you've been fretting over some phantom chills on the northern border. I told her not to worry. Just a few rogue stragglers. I brought 200 of my best warriors. We'll march north tomorrow. Slaughter whatever is out there and be back in time for the champagne. David's jaw tightened. The threat in the north is not rogue wolves, Silas. It requires a defensive strategy, not a blind offensive. Nonsense, Silas scoffed, waving a massive hand. He finally looked past David, his amber eyes narrowing. And who is this? I thought I knew all your royal guards. Standing 2 paces behind and slightly to the left of David was Lisa. She was dressed in the traditional midnight black leather armor of the King's Shadow Guard, an elite, silent order that answered only to the Alpha King. A dark cowl was pulled over her head, and a silver half-mask obscured the upper half of her face, leaving only her jaw and lips visible. My new personal attaché, David said smoothly. Her identity is a matter of royal security. Serafina's smile turned brittle. She knew exactly who was under the mask, having recognized the curve of her jaw and her height. But exposing her would mean questioning the king's ancient traditions in front of her father and the entire court. David had checkmated her. A female shadow guard? Silas sneered, stepping closer to Lisa, trying to use his massive frame to intimidate her. How progressive. Let's hope she doesn't break a nail. Lisa didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still, her heartbeat steady, completely unbothered by the sheer weight of Silas's aggressive alpha aura. Suddenly, David felt a sharp, icy spike of sensation in his mind. It wasn't a thought, but a feeling, a foreign intrusion that carried the scent of rust and roses. He reeks of it. David nearly staggered. It was a mind link. But a mind link was only possible between pack members, or between a king and his direct subordinates. An alpha could never seamlessly enter another alpha's mind without a violent psychic clash. Unless the magic of the blood moon allowed for something deeper. Keep your face neutral. Lisa's voice echoed in his head, calm and cold as a winter stream. David forced himself to look mildly bored as Silas turned away, dismissing the silent guard. What are you talking about? David thought back, projecting the question toward her presence in his mind. The sickness in the north, Lisa replied. The dead air, the rotting earth. Alpha Silas is drenched in the exact same necrotic scent. He isn't here to help you fight the shadow, David. David watched Silas embrace his daughter, laughing boisterously at something she said. The king's blood ran ice cold as Lisa's final words echoed in his skull, rearranging every piece of the political chessboard. He is the one who woke it. The solstice ball was a masterclass in opulent deception. Thousands of crystal prisms caught the light of roaring hearths, casting a warm, deceptive glow over the grand ballroom. The air was thick with the scent of roasted venison, spun sugar, and the intoxicating heavy musk of 300 alpha and beta wolves, mingling under a truce. A string quartet played a lively waltz in the corner, entirely drowned out by the boisterous laughter and clinking of champagne flutes. David moved through the crowd with the practiced grace of a predator, stalking through tall grass. He nodded to visiting dignitaries, shook hands with allied generals, and offered tight, diplomatic smiles, all while his pulse hammered a steady, warning rhythm against his ribs. 3 of Silas's enforcers just moved to the eastern exits. Lisa's voice whispered in his mind, cool and detached. They are locking the doors from the inside, the heavy iron bars. David took a sip of his bourbon, his face an unreadable mask. He didn't look up at the shadowed balcony circling the ballroom, but he knew exactly where she was. How many exits left? He projected back. Only the grand foyer doors. Silas is funneling everyone into a trap. I need to find the tether. Be careful, David warned, a flare of genuine anxiety tightening his chest. If he catches you, he won't. Keep him talking. Keep Serafina distracted. The psychic link severed with a soft snap, leaving David feeling momentarily hollow. He turned just as Serafina materialized at his side, her arm sliding possessively through his. She was radiant in a gown of spun silver, a diamond tiara resting in her golden hair. She looked every inch the queen she believed she was about to become. You look tense, my love, Serafina murmured, leaning in close so her breath brushed his ear. Smile. My father is about to make his toast. It is the formal declaration of our pacts merging. You should look victorious. I am merely anticipating the outcome of the night, David replied smoothly, covering her hand with his. Her skin felt too warm, too polished. The sickeningly sweet scent of her perfume suddenly made his stomach churn. Across the room, Alpha Silas stepped onto the raised dais, tapping a silver spoon against his crystal glass. The sharp, ringing sound cut through the chatter. The room fell into a sudden, expectant silence. Friends, allies, and future kin. Silas boomed, his voice carrying the heavy, intoxicating weight of the Alpha command. He raised his glass, his amber eyes locking directly onto David. Tonight, we do not just celebrate the turning of the earth. We celebrate evolution. We celebrate a union that will purge the weakness from our lands and ensure the supreme dominance of the wolf. The crowd murmured in agreement, raising their glasses. But David's heightened senses picked up the subtle shift in the room. Silas's men had drawn closer to the center, their hands resting casually over the hilts of concealed silver blades. High above, in the darkened corridors of the guest wing, Lisa moved like smoke. She bypassed two heavily armed guards with a simple wave of her hand, the silver magic weaving through their minds, plunging them into a deep, dreamless sleep before they hit the floor. She slipped into Silas's sprawling suite. The air inside was vile. It tasted of rotting meat and ancient graves. Lisa closed her eyes, letting her blood moon instincts guide her. The magic Silas was using wasn't his own. He was merely a conduit, siphoning necrotic energy from the earth to feed the shadow in the north. To control it, he needed an anchor. She found it beneath the floorboards under his massive oak bed. It was a jagged piece of obsidian, pulsing with a sickly, purple-black light. Dark, oily tendrils of magic seeped from it, sinking into the foundation of the pack house itself. David. Lisa's voice cracked through the mind link, tight with urgency. It's an earth tether. He's been poisoning your pack house from the inside out. He isn't just trying to conquer your territory. He's trying to drain the life force of every wolf in this room to feed the shadow. Can you break it? David demanded. I have to bring it to him, she replied, the silver glow igniting in her eyes as she reached for the cursed stone. The magic must be severed at the source. To King David, Silas roared, hoisting his glass higher. And to the new era. To the king, the crowd echoed. Dozens of glasses tilted backward. But before the champagne could touch their lips, David's voice, amplified by a terrifying, earth-shaking alpha roar, shattered the delicate crystal in Silas's hand. Do not drink, David commanded. The resulting silence was absolute. Guests froze, champagne dripping from shattered flutes onto the polished marble. Marcus and the royal enforcers immediately drew their weapons, stepping in front of the king. Silas didn't look surprised. He slowly wiped the spilled champagne from his hand, a cruel, mocking smile spreading across his scarred face. "David, is this how you treat your guests? Your future family?" "You are no family of mine, Silas," David growled, stepping away from Serafina. He turned to face his chosen Luna, his eyes cold and hard. "Did you know?" Serafina's perfect mask didn't slip. She lifted her chin, her blue eyes flashing with a sudden, chilling arrogance. "I know that my father has found a way to guarantee our survival. You are weak, David. You coddle the humans. You tolerate the lesser packs. The power in the north. It is a gift. It will make us gods." A collective gasp rippled through the gathered nobility. The betrayal was absolute, laid bare under the blazing chandeliers. "You invited a parasite into my home," David said, his claws fully extending, ripping through the expensive fabric of his suit jacket. "You are guilty of high treason." "Treason is a word used by the defeated," Silas roared. He slammed his fist onto the table. "Kill the king's guard. The throne is mine." Chaos erupted. Silas's men lunged, silver blades flashing. But before the first drop of blood could spill, the temperature in the ballroom plummeted to freezing. The roaring hearths instantly snuffed out, plunging the room into an eerie, suffocating twilight. A suffocating scent of rot filled the air. Silas had triggered the necrotic magic, drawing on the shadow in the north to paralyze the room. David felt his limbs grow heavy, his wolf whining in his chest as the dark magic sapped his strength. He dropped to one knee, gasping for air. "Look at your king," Silas sneered, walking slowly down the dais steps, brought to his knees by the true power of the earth. "The earth does not answer to a parasite." A voice echoed, harmonic and terrifying. From the high balcony, a figure leapt. She didn't fall. She descended, wrapped in a blinding, luminescent cyclone of silver light. Lisa landed in the center of the ballroom floor, the marble cracking in a spiderweb pattern beneath her boots. She threw off her dark cowl. The silver half-mask was gone. "The servant girl?" Serafina shrieked, her composure finally breaking into genuine disbelief. "Kill her." Two of Silas's men charged Lisa. She didn't even look at them. She simply raised a hand. A wave of pure, kinetic force, glowing like captured starlight, blasted outward, throwing the massive enforcers across the room where they crumpled, unconscious. Lisa turned her storm-cloud eyes toward Silas. The gray melted away, replaced by the terrifying, unbroken silver of the Blood Moon lineage. In her left hand, she held the pulsing obsidian tether. "You dare steal the magic of the ancients, Silas of Silver Lake?" Lisa's voice vibrated through the floorboards, shaking the very foundation of the pack house. "You dare corrupt the soil!" Silas stumbled backward, genuine terror finally breaking through his arrogant facade. "The Blood Moon. Impossible. You were exterminated." "We were resting," Lisa corrected softly. She crushed the obsidian stone in her bare hand. The destruction of the tether caused an implosion of dark magic. A shockwave of black energy violently expelled from Silas's chest, the backlash of the severed connection throwing him to the ground. He convulsed, screaming as the necrotic power he had tried to harness turned inward, burning out his nervous system. With the dark magic neutralized, the oppressive weight lifted from the ballroom. David surged to his feet, his golden alpha aura flaring to life, radiating pure, righteous fury. "Marcus," secure the perimeter. Arrest every member of the Silver Lake Pack. The royal enforcers, their strength returned, moved with lethal efficiency. Within seconds, Silas's remaining men threw down their weapons, recognizing they were vastly outmatched by the king and the terrifying silver-eyed female standing at his side. Seraphina tried to run, her silver gown tangling around her legs. David was in front of her in a blur of motion, grabbing her by the throat and lifting her an inch off the ground. "David, please," she choked out, tears finally spilling over her porcelain cheeks. "I am your Luna." "You are nothing but a traitor," David snarled, his voice a lethal, low rumble. He threw her to the marble floor at Marcus's feet. "Take her to the deep cells. Let her rot with her father." The ballroom was dead silent, save for the ragged breathing of the terrified nobility. They watched, wide-eyed, as the Alpha King turned his back on his broken engagement and walked toward the center of the room. Lisa stood amidst the scattered shards of obsidian, her silver aura slowly fading back into the quiet gray storms of her normal eyes. She looked exhausted, her small frame swaying slightly. David reached her, gently cupping her face with his large, calloused hands. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through them both, a rightness that resonated in their very souls. He looked into her eyes, seeing the quiet, unassuming girl who had scrubbed his floors and the terrifying, ancient queen who had just saved his kingdom. "You could have run," David said quietly. The words meant only for her. "When you broke the tether, you could have escaped." "I told you, David." Lisa smiled, a genuine, tired expression that reached her eyes. "I don't run from the dark. I protect my pack." David turned to face his court. He kept his arm firmly around Lisa's waist, pulling her flush against his side. He didn't demand they bow. He didn't have to. The sheer magnitude of their combined auras, the unyielding earth and the tempestuous storm, forced the room to their knees in absolute submission. "For too long, I blinded myself to the rot within our own walls for the sake of politics." David's voice rang out, clear and uncompromising. "I accepted a Luna based on a treaty, ignoring the truth in front of me. That ends tonight." He looked down at Lisa, the wolf inside him purring with absolute satisfaction. "The threat in the north is broken. The traitors are in chains," David declared. "And you will all bear witness to the dawn of a new era. Meet Lisa of the Blood Moon." He paused, his golden eyes sweeping over the kneeling crowd. "Meet your true Luna." The solstice ball had begun as a celebration of a lie. But it ended in the crowning of a terrifying, beautiful truth. The king had found his queen in the shadows, and together they would burn the old world down. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pack forever changed. The Alpha King had looked past the polished veneer of a strategic alliance to find his true equal in the shadows. Seraphina's treachery, fueled by her father's dark ambitions, ultimately dismantled her own crown, paving the way for a reign built on ancient truth. David and Lisa stood together, a union of earth and storm, ready to lead their people into a new dawn. "Thank you for experiencing. I, the Alpha King, visited his servant unannounced. What he saw made him reject his chosen Luna. If you enjoyed this tale of betrayal, hidden power, and fated romance, please like, share with your fellow fiction lovers, and subscribe for more thrilling original stories."